The sight of the enigmatic sea creature swimming closer to his boat left the man in a state of shock. Suddenly, and without any forewarning, the creature leaped out of the water, heading straight towards him. Newport Beach, a renowned coastal city in California, attracts a large number of tourists each year. The area boasts a multitude of coastal attractions and fun activities suitable for people of all ages. James Gilkinson recently took his 11-year-old niece on a visit to this famous city. Rather than filling their day with a multitude of activities, their sole focus was on one thing: boat riding. While out on the ocean, they had an unforgettable encounter with a strange creature. The weather was perfect, and James was thrilled to bask in the sunlight and inhale the fresh air. His niece had always possessed an adventurous spirit, eagerly anticipating the boat ride just as much as he did. After strolling along the beach, they boarded the boat and set out to sea, surrounded by a picturesque bay that was nothing short of stunning. Occasionally, James would glance back at the throngs of joyful people congregating on the sandy shore. His niece stood close to the rails, taking in the scenery. The waves were gentle and shining like crystals. Suddenly she let out a small gasp. "I think there's something in the water," she said to her uncle. "I think it's following us." James hurried over to where she stood. He couldn't see anything beneath the water and explained to her that they were too close to the shores to see anything before heading back to where the boat's motor was. James assured her that there was nothing to worry about. The young girl wasn't exactly satisfied with his response, but decided to drop the matter. She turned her attention back to the water, hoping to catch another glimpse of the strange thing. She was certain she had spotted a wild animal over the next couple of minutes. The uncle and his niece sat in silence as their boat continued to ride further and further away from the shoreline. The seagulls squawked from above them as waves splashed against each other. The pair could no longer hear the chattering tourists. James estimated that they were around 2 miles, 3 kilometers off from the coast of Newport Beach. "Look over there," the girl cried. This time James believed her wasting little time. He rushed towards his niece. She pointed at an area to their left, and he squinted his eyes, trying his hardest to identify what she saw. James' heartbeat started to speed up. Together they stared out at the swaying waves, eager to see the object better. "Just watch what happens next. There is definitely something there," James thought to himself. However, the moving water was effective in hiding it. At first, James couldn't tell if it was a piece of seaweed or if it was a small animal. Going with his intuition, the man assumed that the thing was the latter. The unidentified creature was gray, brown in color, and very shiny. Although it was a fair distance away from the boat, James thought it looked to be around the length of his arm. James navigated the boat so that it was facing the mysterious thing. Slowly, he began to move the boat forwards, wanting to get closer to it. His niece acted as his pair of eyes. She took out her phone and started to record the strange thing just in case they ended up discovering something interesting. It turned out that the girl was right all along. Not only was the thing definitely an animal, but it had also been following them for some time now. Halting the boat, James leaned over the rail so that he could study the creature's appearance. He had heard of this animal before, but he never thought he'd see it in the flesh. The animal was a wild sea lion, and it was the only one in the area. James's niece was delighted. She handed her phone over to her uncle and waved to the sea lion, encouraging her to come closer. As it neared the boat, the details of the animal became clearer. Considering its small size, the sea lion was definitely juvenile. It displayed no hostile behavior and seemed very eager to communicate with humans. It kept its dark eyes glued on the girl, who couldn't hold back her laughter. She thought the animal was adorable. "Hi, baby," she called out to the young sea creature. With his niece's phone in one of his hands, James kneeled down so that the camera could see the animal better. It ended up swimming right beside the boat. The sea lion's head continued to bob up and down, but James noticed something off about the animal. It didn't seem to be very energetic. Even though it was young, James believed that the sea lion was exhausted. Without a warning, the baby sea lion jumped up onto the boat. James and his niece stepped back, their mouths dropping open in shock. However, the animal didn't seem like it wanted to cause any trouble. Rather, it looked as if it wanted a break from all the swimming. James and the girl took pity on the baby animal. It must have been a very long way from home. They had never before heard of sea lions being spotted at Newport Beach. As the boat rocked ever so gently, the young sea lion looked out at the great expanse of blue water at that moment. James thought that the animal resembled a human in its behavior. The sea lion stayed in that position for a few minutes, peacefully watching by the rail. James decided to join the animal, moving forwards until he was only a few steps away from it. Then the sea lion spun around. James sat down to give the animal more space, not wanting to overwhelm it. The last thing he wanted to do was scare it away. This was the closest he had ever been to one of its kind. Fortunately for him, the sea lion seemed to be in a very good mood. The young creature neared James. Its small face was even cuter up close. The sea lion sniffed the man's knee a couple of times, just how a cat or dog would when meeting someone for the first time. This animal appeared to be no different from a typical house pet. After becoming more familiar with James' scent, the sea lion began to rub its head against his leg as a sign of affection. James couldn't believe his eyes. He was pretty sure that there were rules in place that cautioned people from interacting with any wild animals. However, the man didn't have the heart to tell the baby sea lion to go. The last thing that James wanted to do was cause the creature any harm, and it had been the one to approach the boat. Hesitantly, James placed a hand on the sea lion's wet coat, petting it as lightly as possible. The animal responded positively, moving its head with a little more energy. James's niece took the phone, which was still recording from her uncle. The girl wanted to capture the sweet moment between her uncle and the wild creature on camera, knowing that it was going to be an interesting story to tell to others after their trip ended. Over the next hour, James and the sea lion cuddled. The girl had never seen her uncle smile like that before. He looked as if his wildest dreams had come. She had always been aware of her uncle's affinity for animals and the ocean. However, when they had planned this vacation together, neither of them anticipated the heart-wrenching situation they were about to encounter. Eventually, the time arrived for James and the sea lion to bid each other farewell. As the evening drew near, James and his niece had to conclude their boat ride and make their way back home. Upon the boat's arrival at the harbor, James stood up gradually. The sea lion, being the clever creature, comprehended the circumstances and gazed at the humans with a joyful expression before leaping off the boat and into the sea. Encountering a wild sea lion was a novel experience for James, and it went beyond his expectations. Furthermore, it was the first time that his young niece had ever been approached by a wild animal. The two departed Newport Beach with broad grins and fulfilled hearts, cherishing a memory that would endure forever. Please share your thoughts on what you enjoyed most about this story by leaving a comment below. I would be delighted to hear your feedback. If you found this video enjoyable, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with your loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to receive notifications about our latest uploads. Thank you for your support.